Welcome to this episode about Arab affairs. As usual, we will be discussing an important Arab file, and today we'll be speaking about the outrage the Arab world and the Islamic world are seeing because of the escalation in violence in the Palestinian occupied territories that were erupted by Israeli provocations to some of the Palestinians trying to take them off their own homes and to make way for Jewish settlers, and because of the breaking or storming Al-Aqsa Mosque, particularly during the holy month of Ramadan and the Eid al-Fitr al-Mubarak. The violence has been causing lots of outrage in the Arab and Muslim world, has already called for the de-escalation of the situation and the halt of the Israeli provocations to the Palestinian territories. On top of the Arab countries who have made or exerted extreme efforts during the past period in order to stop those violations, was Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and many other countries. The US has recently, or has just yesterday, called for stopping or halting the hostilities, and has said it is putting great concern with the escalation in the Palestinian territories, and has said that it is weighing options and is very much supporting the Egyptian mediation. We'll be speaking about the developments in the Palestinian territories, and we'll be speaking about the situation and the Egyptian efforts in order to be able to contain this situation. Before we delve into our discussion, let's first have a quick look on the Arab news that took place during this week, and we'll come back for more discussion.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi exchanged congratulatory cables with kings and leaders of the Arab and Islamic countries on the occasion of Eid al-Fitr, which began on Thursday. The head of state received a phone call from Jordan's King Abdullah II to congratulate the president on the occasion of Eid al-Fitr. The president also received similar phone calls from Bahraini King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa and Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune. Meanwhile, President Sisi called Saudi Arabia's King Salman bin Abdulaziz, Qatari Emir Tamim bin Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, head of the Sudanese Military Transitional Council General Abdel Fattah Al Burhan, Tunisian President Qais Said, Iraqi President Barham Saleh, Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa Al Kazimi, and head of the Libyan Presidential Council Mohammed El Menfi to congratulate them on the occasion. President Sisi also sent a congratulatory cable to the Egyptian Muslim expats. The United Nations top representative in Iraq called Tuesday on Iraqi officials to ensure the integrity of the October 10th parliamentary vote. The United Nations official warned that the failure to hold a credible election would cause significant, lasting, widespread anger, which in turn could further destabilize the country at a time where strength and unity are desperately needed. He said during a Security Council meeting on the country that reiterates his call to all Iraqi stakeholders to uphold the integrity of the electoral process. Since October 2019, a widespread campaign of killings, kidnappings, and threats has rocked the country. Some 30 activists have been killed and dozens abducted. A new unity government in Libya had raised hopes the war-ravaged North African nation had turned a corner towards peace, but analysts warn that major stumbling blocks remain. Thousands of foreign mercenaries are still on the ground. Political factions remain deeply divided, and the promise of election in December seems to be slipping away. The toppling and killing of dictator Muammar al-Qaddafi in 2011 NATO-backed uprising plunged Libya into a bloody decade-long struggle for power. After a grim year-long battle for the western capital of Tripoli, in which rival camps were backed by foreign powers, a truce last summer finally led to a former UN-mediated ceasefire in October that was followed in March by establishment of a new unity government to replace rival administrations in East and West. The United Nations envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, is expected to leave his current post. The U.S. State Department blasted Houthi militia for skipping the opportunity for talks with Griffiths to discuss a possible resolution to the conflict in Yemen. Houthi rebels recently refused to meet with the 69-year-old British diplomat who has held the position since 2018. Griffiths' expected new position will be in New York, serving the United Nations Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs.
Welcome back. And Egypt has condemned the escalation in Jerusalem and Al-Quds, and then has embarked on several diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation, and also has carried out with several important steps, the latest of which was sending a delegation to the occupied lands and to meet with the Israeli side as well. We have with us over the phone Ambassador Mohammed Higazi, former Assistant Foreign Minister, to highlight the situation. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon to you, Mona.
Right, and as we've been seeing since before Eid al-Fitr, and we have been seeing Israeli provocation inside the Palestinian occupied lands, how do you view the escalation and the provocations that were made, and what exactly are the reasons for that? How do you view the timing?
Once again, we see the Israeli provocations goes to bring the whole community in Palestine in a confrontation that has been with us since, and it has repeated itself in Gaza. They have caused in the past few weeks the failure of the Palestinian internal election because of their stance against election in Jerusalem. And then in the holy month of Ramadan, provoking the prayers in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, at the same time confronting the people in the Sheikh Jarrah district, trying to dismantle their historical presence in this area to favor a group of settlers who have falsified their documentation and supported, unfortunately, by the legal courts in Israel. Once again, Israel has proven to be irresponsible and in provocation of international law. And I don't think that the Israelis are the only one to be blamed. It is the international community who fails to express the true meaning of occupation, the true meaning of an apartheid state who exert violence against civilians, against children and women. In international law, Israel should respect the people living under occupation. This is the fourth Geneva Convention. At the same time, they have practiced that with violence in 2009, 2012, 2014, 17. It goes like that. The international community should label those acts as criminal, and they have to express their position the same way they have expressed a very clear international stance of boycotting the apartheid regime in South Africa. Otherwise, they will go unnoticed as long as they are protected. All of us know the illegality of settlers and their activities by international law and by the Security Council resolutions itself. So settlers are part of the government, are part of the practice, are part of the legal system in Israel. They all protecting each other. And really dealing with civilians like this is a war crime that requires international court to deal with. And I think the international community should work together to bring the parties to settle the current dispute. Otherwise, it will butt in because Israel are not willing to give up to peace. They are not willing to withdraw from the occupied territory, and the international community should help both sides through a meaningful negotiation to reach conclusion. Otherwise, you will leave it to settlers, you will leave it to internal politics in Israel and to their prime minister who's trying to profit from the current situation to enhance his very weak position. And in his fourth attempt to form government against the attempts of the opposition, but the victims are the Palestinians, always the Palestinians, and the international community, and particularly in certain countries in Europe who has shown sympathy with Israel, sympathy with the killers, with those who have used violence unnoticed against civilians, against children and women. I don't think that what is happening today is to be calmed for once and then to get provoked again. It has to be dealt with in an integrated manner to bring about a meaningful peace that will allow Israel to live in peace, Palestinians to enjoy living in a statehood that will bring stability to the Middle East. Otherwise, we will remain all in this vicious circle. People talked about the Abrahamic agreements as a way Arabs are trying to tell the Jews and tell the Israelis that we are close and we can reach peace. We have the Arab peace initiative before, and we've been giving many initiatives to the Israelis, but it seems that the right-wing government in Israel are not willing to listen to peace, and I think the role of international community has to be much more vocal. Otherwise, we will fall again victim to the violence exerted by apartheid and colonialism once again in the last piece of geography that is suffering from colonialism.
Yes, Ambassador Hegazi, yes, before I go to the Egyptian efforts, because the Egyptian efforts have been this time enormous, but before I go to the steps taken by Egypt in order to find a way for de-escalation to the situation, I have here to weigh the U.S. position. And the U.S. position started from Israel has to defend itself till U.S. President Joe Biden's latest statements of trying to find calm to the situation, or resorting to Egypt and supporting its mediation. Also, the U.S. first has tried for the UN Security Council not to hold this emergency meeting, and then, I mean, here the U.S. position has been not very much focused this time, not very much precise this time. How do you view the U.S. position towards this particular issue and its change in course?
Again, Mona, it's the same hesitant position. It's the same position that allowed the killers to continue because they are not naming it the right way. At the same time, while the United States was absent in taking one of the most important decision in the Security Council to condemn settlers, again, we are appeasing them by silencing our reaction. So I think the United States needs to play a different role if the Democratic parties and President Biden is really vocal about human rights. He can see human rights goes to attain the livelihood of people, their housing, their history, their land. And if truly we are true to our post-COVID, because I don't think the post-COVID era should be the same of exploitation, of occupation, of apartheid. We have to raise the flag of human rights and democracy, and no violation to human rights happening more than it is in Palestine. So I think President Biden should show leadership, otherwise the bloodshed. And those governments in Europe also who are appeasing Israel, one because of some historical problem like in Germany, and others in Eastern Europe who have really supported Israel in a way that does not. Everybody is condemning violence, but nobody is with occupation and apartheid. I think this is time for international community in the post-COVID era to come up firmly to support democracy and human rights. Who violated the code for the Palestinians to run their democratic election in May? Who allowed Israel to conduct such a bad thought exercise of expelling Palestinians from the Sheikh Jarrah district? Who have allowed them to provoke prayers in the holy month of Ramadan? Who is the one who is enhancing extremism and radicalism, not only in the Middle East but worldwide? Those who are exerting those practices and those who are silent about it.
If I may ask you here, Egypt from the very beginning has started its actions towards de-escalating the situation, has resorted to some of the diplomatic efforts, has opened the Rafah borders to be able to take the injured, and opened all hospitals. Please brief us on these steps that have been taken by Egypt since the very beginning up till the last minute, which has seen an Egyptian delegation in the Palestinian occupied territories.
In confronting the negligence of many parties, particularly Israel, in the region, Egypt is a responsible country. It carries its responsibility in all fronts, in the political front, in the economic front, in creating stability, in confronting terrorism, in helping even and curbing on illegal immigration, while others are acting in a selfish way to disrupt the region, to only benefit from disarray, and to link with the international partners to make their expansion and occupation alive. Egypt, I was reading on what happened in 2009. We opened borders, we carried our responsibility toward injured, we have sent ambulances, we have supported international community supplies to Gaza. We spoke to the Israeli government, we sent delegations. We will keep doing that because this is our region, this is where our people are living, and we have to pave the way for better future for them, for better tourism, better infrastructure. But those who are dedicating themselves to their very selfish, narrow, nationalistic, radical, apartheid, colonial regimes are not the ones who are really part of this region because of their act of violence, continuous act of violence. So I think time has come, and let us be very clear that the international community, I've just read that Russia is behind a call for the quartet to resume its responsibility, because you are helping security in Israel by driving the Israelis towards peace. Peace is the only guarantor to the Israelis as well as to the Palestinians. Unless The Israeli radical regime understands that only through peace that Egypt and Jordan have enjoyed, and now with the support of many Gulf countries to the idea of living together, they have seized the opportunity not to repeat the same rhetorics, the same politics, the same support to settlers. We should think of a time that will come that Palestine will exist next to Israel, and both Palestine, Jordan, and Israel will have their joint initiative, economic and political. Unless we do that, unless we drive the radical parties and the fanatics in Israel towards peace, look at the people in Israel running in the streets in fear, or the people who are mourning their death in Gaza. Who is benefiting from that? There is no logic. There is no healthy mind that can really think of that unless those fanatics who are benefiting the radical organization in the region and the radical thoughts that will affect Israel today with Hamas, tomorrow I don't know who will be the enemy. And if you are living in an era of animosity, the world community should intervene. Otherwise, we will remain in a vicious circle.
Right, Ambassador Mohammed Hegazi, former Assistant Foreign Minister, we thank you so much for being with us over the phone and for highlighting the situation and the Egyptian efforts. Before we continue on with our discussion, let's first take this report and Egypt's efforts in trying to de-escalate the situation or the tense situation in the Palestinian occupied territories. Let's watch.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Sameh Shoukry pressed Israel to immediately halt its aggression on Palestinian territories. The foreign minister remarks came during a telephone call with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who urged a complete ceasefire in order to save lives and clear the way for political efforts. Earlier, Shoukry retreated to Israeli Foreign Minister that Egypt is keen on restoring stability in the region through diplomatic means, adding that the ongoing flare-up highlights the need to resume long-stalled Palestinian-Israeli peace talks to establish a Palestinian state on the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry also had a phone conversation with France's counterpart Yves Le Drian over developments in Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa Mosque compound and Gaza Strip. During the call, Shoukry stressed that Israel should halt its attacks on Gaza and the need for a full and immediate ceasefire in a bid to re-kicking political efforts to reach a final settlement to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The FM also received another phone call from Irish counterpart Simon Kivini that probed the developments and efforts by the United Nations Security Council to maintain international peace and security amid fears of further escalation. On Tuesday, the foreign minister delivered Egypt's statement before the emergency ministerial meeting of the Arab League to confront Israeli attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. In his statement, Shoukry expressed his condemnation of what Al-Aqsa Mosque have been subjected to during the past days. The top diplomat declared Egypt's total rejection and condemnation of these brutal Israeli practices.
Right, welcome back. And in fact, Egypt has been taking lots of steps since the very beginning. Speaking about the steps that Egypt have been already taking since April 24th, the start of the issue. Egypt condemned the hostile acts carried out by the Israeli extremist settlers against Palestinians in the old city in East Jerusalem, who left scores of Palestinians wounded. On the 26th of April, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry discussed the dangerous developments in East Jerusalem, stressing the importance of halting all the Israeli provocation measures in violations. On May 10th, there was this great speech by the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar Authority, and yet yesterday there was a very tough statements during Al-Guma prayers from Sheikh Hashim Omar. Also, the Egyptian authorities has been carrying out with several other diplomatic efforts, including a session or attending a session in the UN Security Council, including calling some of the international parties concerned with the situation, the US, the European Union, and some of the European countries, and some, of course, of the Arab countries, opening the borders for the injured and opening all hospitals in order to be able to treat those injured in the situation. Also, there have been so many steps taken by Egypt. The latest was sending a delegation that has met with the Palestinian parties and with the Israeli ones. However, the situation is still very sensitive and the situation is still very critical. Let me here take with me over the phone Mr. Ramzi Khouri, journalist from Jordan. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
Yes, and we're speaking here about the developments so far in the Palestinian occupied territories. Up till this morning, we have been seeing some of the Israeli strikes on the Gaza Strip, and up till now there are more than 139 people who had died, with 39 children and 21 women. That is the civilian casualties. How do you view the developments? Please brief us on the situation.
Well, the situation continues. Gaza is a very small territory that is under total siege. Israel is capable of bombarding it from the land, from the air, and from the sea, and that's what Israel is doing. The casualties are tremendous. When we're talking about these numbers, most of these people are civilians. Obviously, the only thing that the Gazans are able to do is to fire their barrage of so-called rockets. These rockets are not advanced rockets. A lot of people believe or think when they hear the word rocket that Gaza is armed like a state. That's not the case. All of these are homemade, makeshift rockets that do not create major damage. And therefore, there is no comparison between what is going on between two sides as they are now being portrayed, especially in the Western media, that it's a war between Israel and the Palestinians. Of course, it's not an equal war, not in any sort of way or manner. And this fiasco can continue for a very long time. The only people who will pay the price are the civilians, mostly out of Gaza and the West Bank. In the West Bank, 11 people have been killed so far. So it's not just about Gaza, it's about the whole of Palestine.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Khouri, we've been seeing or hearing reports of using some of the illegal weapons on the Palestinians in the occupied territories. How far is that true? How is the situation in the occupied territories at large? We're speaking here about Al-Quds, because it all started from Sheikh Jarrah district and then the storming into Al-Aqsa Mosque. How do you view the situation in the occupied lands at large?
The situation all over is dramatic. one of the most important things and developments that have happened is the rising of the Palestinians who live in the 1948 territories. These are Israeli citizens who have risen in support of Al-Aqsa and Jerusalem even before the bombardment of Gaza started. And what has happened is fascinating. Right this moment, you're talking about thousands of right-wing fascists roaming the cities inside of 1948, such as Lud and Haifa and Jaffa and all of the cities that are inside of the Israeli territory. And they are being protected by the police, and they are being protected by the reserve army that Netanyahu has decided to unleash on these Israeli cities. And therefore, you are looking at a picture of apartheid by all means. This is what apartheid is. It's not about two states fighting each other or a state occupying another. This is a racist state that is actually unleashing its own police force that is supposed to implement and enforce the law. They are unleashing them on the civilian population that is not Jewish. Now, this is why it's proof that Israel is a state of apartheid, and that it is not an issue of a war between an occupier and the occupied. There is a much deeper, much bigger problem than that. Obviously, the Palestinians who are carrying Israeli citizenship are Palestinians. They understand more than anybody else that they are living in a state of apartheid, because they know that they are not equal citizens. They know that even the law is not going to stand by them. They know that when an issue goes to court, there is no justice in court, because it is based on an apartheid system. They will differentiate between an Israeli citizen of Jewish religion or descent, but and anybody else, such as a Muslim or a Christian or a Druze or a Circassian or all of those people who are actually living in that state. And this is why I believe that we are seeing big demonstrations happening worldwide in support of the Palestinian people. The demonstrations that have happened in the USA, whether in Chicago, you are talking about tens of thousands of people who went out, or in Washington, D.C., or in New York. They are the largest pro-Palestinian demonstrations in history.
Here I do really want to emphasize not the demonstrations that happened in some of the capitals, but I would really want to emphasize the situation inside the Israeli inside the Israeli lands, the people themselves, because we have seen that not Israelis are with the steps that have been taken by the Israeli governments. How do you view the situation inside Israel because of those steps that were taken by the Israeli government, and why, from your point of view, do you think that the Israeli government has taken those steps at this very particular timing?
The biggest problem that we see inside of Israel is that the Israeli society, over the so many years of the rule of Netanyahu, has been shifting to the right. And they have been brainwashed. And it's become all about, they are a supremacy in terms of, they do actually believe that they are better than Arabs, for example. And this shift to the right and towards supremacy and towards support of apartheid has kept Netanyahu in power all of those years. The guy was getting elected over and over and over again. And that does not mean that there aren't Israelis inside of Israeli society who are coming out and saying, this is garbage, what is going on here is not acceptable. There are these people, but unfortunately we are talking about a majority from amongst the population that have allowed Netanyahu to continue in power. His war now that he has just launched has most likely saved them politically, because just before the war erupted, and again, it's not a real war, it's mostly the oppressor massacring the oppressed. But before all of this fiasco has started, the other parties have managed to create an agreement in order to remove Netanyahu from power. And there was going to become a government that was going to be presented to the Israeli president, and Netanyahu would have been out of power. Now that government wasn't going to be a cohesive government, because it had parties such as the party of Naftali Bennett from the extreme right, as well as Meretz, who are extreme left, and so it was not it was not a coalition that was a proper coalition. However, they all agreed on one thing: Netanyahu has to go. So what happens? Netanyahu launches this war on Gaza in an attempt to unite the Israeli people behind him. Naftali Bennett, whose supporters are all racist Israelis, decided to pull out, and now it is very difficult to form that government and get rid of Netanyahu.
Right.
And Netanyahu knew that this would happen, you see.
Yes.
And some voices are emerging from inside of the Israeli political echelons that are saying that Netanyahu did all of this to save himself. It's for to make sure that he doesn't get out of power.
Let me here ask you, how did that reflect on the Arab and Islamic world? And I mean, for the very first time, not for the very first time, but rather this time is very much the whole Arab and Islamic world are outraged. To which extent do you think that the de-escalation in those actions would really ignite a kind of instability in the whole region?
Well, first of all, it is commendable to see the size of support that we have seen in Egypt, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria. These are the countries that are bordering Israel. And the people went out en masse. In Jordan, tens of thousands of people added to the borders, demanding that the government open the border. They wanted to go in and support the Palestinians physically. Now, what is important about this? And of course, this sentiment is there in Tunisia, in Morocco, in
no, it's not
Algeria.
just
the whole Arab world.
No, it's not just sentiments, sir. There have been precise movements, particularly from Egypt and Tunisia, who has called for UN Security Council to convene, and many other countries. But the issue is, to which extent do you think this would trigger an outrage and instability in the whole region? And in half a minute, because this is all what I have for you, sir.
If this continues, then it is going to create major instability, because people are not going to sit there and watch their brothers and sisters getting massacred in cold blood. But I doubt it will continue. It seems to me that the USA has given Israel until Sunday to finish its business.
Yes.
Now, that's not fantastic from the USA, but the USA understands very well that it will start getting blamed
Yes.
for what is going on in Palestine, and therefore they gave the Israelis a few days to do their dirty business and finish it, supposedly until Sunday, which is tomorrow. But if it does continue, then it will erupt.
Yes,
but I want
yes.
to say something that is very important. What is really important about what we're seeing today happening all over the Arab world and inside of Palestine, the new generations, the youth have not forgotten Palestine. The youth are very patriotic and very nationalistic.
Yes, indeed. Indeed, they are. And all our supports to the Palestinians youth and the Palestinian fighters and people who are really standing to their own lands. I have to end it here. Mr. Ramzi Khouri, journalist from Jordan, we thank you so much for being with us. Before we leave you, we'll have to see this report on the developments in the Palestinian-occupied lands. Let's watch.
As Israel steps up its aggressive offensive, Israeli planes renewed airstrikes on Gaza early on Saturday, and Hamas responded by firing rockets into Israel as their battle entered its fifth night. Palestinian medics said at least 4 people were killed in one of several airstrikes in northern Gaza. Residents said Israeli naval boats fired shells from the Mediterranean. The Palestinian Religious Affairs Ministry said Israeli planes destroyed a mosque. With no sign of an end to the fighting, casualties spread further afield, with Palestinians reporting 11 killed in the occupied West Bank amid clashes between protesters and Israeli occupation forces. At least 132 people have been killed in Gaza since Monday, including 32 children and 21 women, and 950 others wounded.